This is not a beautiful speech praising kindness. This is the final whisper of souls once broken by living kindly in a world that pays no attention. What you are about to hear is the essence drawn from real experiences and the wisdom of masters in psychology like Chao Deng, who has devoted his life to uncovering the truth behind self-sacrificing hearts. If you have ever felt underestimated just because you are too kind, or hurt when the world responds to your kindness with silence or exploitation, then this video is made for you. Watch until the end and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any message that can help you see yourself clearly, powerfully, and with deep love. We have become accustomed to living in a world that defines kindness by visible and measurable actions, gentle words, acts of sacrifice, and suppressing negative emotions to please others. But have you ever wondered, what percentage of that kindness truly comes from unconditional love, and how much stems from the fear of being disliked, rejected, or simply the need to be accepted? According to Carl Jung, the great 20th century psychoanalyst, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is not just theory. It is happening in the lives of millions who consider themselves kind-hearted. Those who always nod yes when inside they scream no, always help others even when they are drained, always stay silent to keep the peace while their hearts are breaking. That is not kindness. It is sacrificing yourself to maintain a false image. Deng, through decades of research and observation, has shown that when kindness comes without boundaries, it becomes a form of self-destruction. You are not only hurt by others but also abandoned by yourself. And it is this self-abandonment, this silence towards your own pain, that hurts you the most. Love cannot exist if you do not love yourself. Kindness has no meaning if it causes you to lose your self-worth. And forgiveness cannot heal if you use it to cover wounds that were never heard. You have the right to say no without feeling guilty. You have the right to be angry without losing your dignity. You have the right to set boundaries without being selfish. This is the first step to transforming kindness from a mask into a part of your soul. When you embrace both the light and the darkness within, you no longer need anyone's approval to know you are kind. And you are no longer hurt when the world turns its back on you, because you no longer offer kindness as a proposal, but as a part of your true being. We cannot heal what we refuse to acknowledge. And that is why so many people who live kindly carry deep, bottomless wounds. They constantly try to control every reaction, every anger, every unwanted thought, as if by being patient enough, forgiving enough, perfect enough, the world will love and respond to them. But that is a dream, beautiful, yet dangerous. Jung called the dark part within each of us the shadow we try to hide. Not because it is evil, but because society and ourselves have been taught that it should not exist. We are not allowed to be angry, selfish, say no, or see ourselves as deserving more. But every time you suppress a part of your true self, you don't make it disappear, you only distort it. And at some point, you will find yourself exploding over small things. Not because of a spoon falling on the table, but because of a lifetime of being underestimated, a lifetime hiding behind the mask of a good person. Deng once said, "A person who cannot reconcile with the darkness within themselves cannot truly reconcile with anyone else." Because when you cannot accept yourself, with your flaws, anger, and personal needs, you unconsciously demand others to always be positive, gentle, and accommodating. And that is an unfair way to communicate. It causes relationships to lose their authenticity and become strained. True kindness is not a gift you give to be loved. It is the light you create after courageously stepping into the darkness. When you can say, "I am angry, but I do not let anger control me," or "I have the right to say no, and I am still a good person," that is the moment you become whole. From that wholeness, kindness blooms. It is no longer exhausting, no longer expecting repayment, no longer bound by others' acceptance. It becomes the highest expression of inner strength, a kindness that is free, bounded, profound, and wise. And you deserve that. Not because you have sacrificed enough, but because you have courageously begun the honest journey with yourself. We cannot grow if we keep denying half of the truth about ourselves. And the truth is, beneath the gentle mask, there is always something left unsaid. A refusal never dared to be spoken aloud. An anger long buried. A desire that has been silent for so long that even we start to believe it no longer exists. But it's still there, smoldering, waiting for a crack to escape. When we understand this, we no longer see the darkness as a problem to solve, but as unexplored territory. Jung once emphasized, "You do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." In other words, becoming good doesn't come from suppressing bad feelings, but from recognizing them, stepping into them, naming them accurately, and asking, "What do you need?" This is not an easy journey, because facing the darkness means facing abandoned memories, shame, and the wounds we once forgot. But it is in these fragile moments that a miracle happens. We begin to truly understand ourselves, not as ideals, but as human beings, complete, contradictory, alive. And from there, we stop demanding others to make us feel whole. Because when we turn inward and listen to the forgotten parts within ourselves, we no longer need someone to fill the emptiness. We can love without control, help without depletion, forgive without denying true feelings. Inner harmony does not come from fleeing the darkness, but from standing beside it, without fear, without judgment. When you can say, "I am angry," and that does not make me a bad person, you have traveled far on the journey to becoming yourself. No need to be perfect, just be real. For Jung, this is the deepest courage of a human being, to live honestly with the entirety of oneself. To be human, not just good. And the irony is, when you stop trying to be a moral ideal, you become more peaceful and kind than ever, because you are living from wholeness, not from lack. The problem isn't kindness itself. It lies in how we equate kindness with disappearing from ourselves. Jung once called this fractured kindness, a kind of kindness that slowly wears us down, like a candle that burns entirely for others without ever asking, "Who will light me up?" There is nothing wrong with wanting to help, to love, or to share. But when these actions start to arise from fear, fear of disappointing others, fear of abandonment, fear of not being good enough, that kindness ceases to be an expression of love and becomes a signal of unhealed wounds. Sadly, this kind of kindness not only exhausts us but also conditions others to take too much without gratitude. They are not bad people. They have simply learned to exploit the emptiness we left behind when we retreated from our boundaries. Some people spend their whole lives seeking recognition by being the one who's always there, the one who always sacrifices, the one who never gets angry. But that recognition, if it ever comes, is only superficial. Because deep inside, what they truly crave is to be seen, to be understood, to be loved, not for what they can do, but simply for who they are. The journey back to ourselves begins when we dare to ask, is the good I am doing coming from love or from fear? And if the answer is fear, it's not time to blame ourselves, but to embrace the part that has long been neglected. That part might be the child who learned to stay silent when hurt, the teenager who tried to please everyone to avoid being left behind, the adult who always pushes themselves to be strong. Healing doesn't come from becoming stronger, but from allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, to feel, to cry, without shame, to say no, without needing to justify, to choose ourselves, without guilt. Jung realized that when we begin to care for that shadow part with compassion, it no longer needs to scream unconsciously through exhaustion or suppressed anger. It will soften, like a child finally held by their mother after years of being forgotten. Because wholeness is not about always being bright, but about the ability to touch the darkness within ourselves, with a gaze of love, not denial. And then one day, amid countless sleepless nights and nameless tears, that person suddenly realized, kindness is not a one-way ticket to love or acceptance. They began to question the entire inner structure they had unconsciously built. A structure in which their own presence was only allowed to exist as a means to please others. Kindness, in that moment, was no longer a free choice but a survival mechanism. A way to be recognized, to feel worthy. But the price was too high. They no longer knew where the boundary between themselves and the outside world lay. It was at that moment, the moment they reached the depths of exhaustion, that they saw a door. A small door, but one that opened into a vast inner world. The world of self-acceptance. There, they didn't need to become someone else to be loved. They didn't need to force themselves to be kind, polite, patient, or sacrificial just to be seen as a good person. They learned to place a hand on their heart and say something they had never dared to say: I need to be loved not because of what I give, but for who I am, whole and imperfect. That was the turning point of healing. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a deep and honest silence. They no longer ran away from the dark parts of themselves. They no longer hid their anger, hurt, disappointment, or even jealousy, feelings that had long been labeled as bad, unworthy. They began to see those emotions as neglected children, not to reject them, but to love and integrate them. In that process, kindness didn't disappear. It quietly transformed. No longer the weak kindness of compromise, but the steady kindness of someone standing firmly in their own truth. Someone who knows how to say no without guilt. Someone who can refuse without shame. Someone who can withdraw from energy-draining relationships without fear of judgment. Such a person never loses compassion, but they no longer allow others to use that compassion as an excuse to avoid their own responsibilities. Inner maturity comes from letting go of the expectation that we must be the healer for everyone. We stop carrying the role of savior and begin to trust that each person has their own journey, their own pain, and their own capacity to overcome. We learn to be with others in their pain without needing to fix them. We show up not to solve, but to be present. And that presence, sometimes, is the greatest gift. This journey is not for those who want easy peace. It's for souls brave enough to see themselves not as victims or heroes, but simply as human beings, with light and darkness, weakness and strength, a desire to be loved and a fear of abandonment. And only when we accept that whole truth can we truly love others unconditionally, because that love does not come from lack, but from wholeness. From the moment we understand that light does not need to eliminate darkness to exist, a new door opens within us. It is the door leading to true maturity, where kindness is no longer a mechanical reaction, no longer an obligation praised by society, but becomes a mindful and courageous practice. In that practice, we learn not only to say yes to love, but also to say no to anything that harms our own wholeness. And the paradox is this: only when we say no from a place full of love does our yes truly hold meaning. Because without boundaries, kindness can be distorted into a form of self-manipulation, a repeated sacrifice that wears down the soul, making it numb, skeptical, and closed off. Kindness, if not anchored in a clear awareness of self-worth, can become a mask worn to hide the fear of rejection, abandonment, or not being good enough. We try to please everyone, and in the process, lose ourselves. The more we give, the more depleted we become, the more we crave understanding, yet feel increasingly lonely within our own kindness. But transformation happens when we pause and look at ourselves with a non-judgmental gaze. When we dare to ask, is this kindness truly coming from love? Or is it a way for me to feel worthy? That question, though uncomfortable, is the beginning of an inner turning point. It requires courage to face the very motives we have long hidden, even from ourselves. And then, the miracle is that when such honesty is present, a new space opens, where kindness is no longer a role to play but an authentic flow arising from a full inner strength. In that flow, we no longer need to force ourselves to be good people. We don't need to appear gentle when we are hurting. We don't need to continue relationships out of fear of being seen as selfish. We realize that voicing our own needs and refusing what does not fit is not cold-heartedness, but a profound kindness to ourselves and others. Because only when we live authentically can the relationships around us have a chance to be real. Only when we know our limits do the things we give carry true weight and sacredness. In that new space, kindness is no longer an indiscriminate outpouring but a directed light. Not everyone who needs it can receive it, and not every moment is the time to give. True kindness needs a worthy place to dwell. Like water needing a vessel to prevent spilling and waste. Boundaries are that vessel. And love, when held within the clear vessel of boundaries, becomes a healing balm, not a dissolving liquid that erases everything. Perhaps it is in the journey of resetting kindness's boundaries that we learn the most precious lesson, that love does not mean enduring, staying silent, or pleasing others at our own expense. Love means seeing ourselves clearly, both our light and darkness, and still choosing to be kind in a way that does not betray ourselves. It means daring to say, I choose to love you, but I will not lose myself in the process. That is when kindness no longer bears a burden but becomes a cool spring flowing freely from a high mountain without needing anyone to push it. It is when kindness requires no praise, no recognition, no repayment, because it no longer comes from a need to be loved but from the truth of a person who is whole. A person who understands that love, giving, and boundaries are not opposites but interwoven in the delicate dance of maturity. And then, from the deepest place inside, we begin to live like a lighthouse, quiet but steadfast, shining bright without burning, guiding without dragging anyone along. It is at that moment that kindness becomes the most beautiful expression of awakening, not to be loved, but because we already are love. There is one thing we often forget on the journey of self-development, that we don't need to become someone else to be worthy of love, acceptance, or inner peace. We only need to return to ourselves, to our authentic being, unedited and whole. But returning is not a passive journey. It requires us to peel away each layer of masks and defense mechanisms we've worn through the years just to survive. It is a process full of courage, not fighting against the darkness within, but inviting it to sit down, listen, understand, and integrate it into a more complete version of ourselves. Because wholeness is not pure, flawless light. True wholeness is where light and darkness shake hands, coexist, and converse. In that inner world, no part is excluded. Nothing is deemed wrong just because it makes others uncomfortable. We don't need to hide anger, pain, longing, or even vulnerability, for every emotion carries a profound message. What matters is not elimination, but transformation. Not imposition, but integration. When we try to be good out of fear of judgment, out of a desire to be accepted, or out of fear of hurting others, that goodness is not yet an expression of true power. It is still tinted by fear and bondage. Only when we can be kind from a place full of inner strength, a place that needs no validation, do we begin to touch the deeper layers of personal power. That is kindness that knows how to set boundaries, knows how to say no without guilt, knows how to choose oneself without justification. And it is only then that we realize, not everything we give is love, and not everything we refuse is selfishness. Inner maturity helps us distinguish between sacrifice and self-abandonment. It grants us the clarity to understand that true love does not require us to shrink, be small, or erase ourselves. True love always supports personal growth, always encourages authenticity and personal power. If a relationship or circumstance makes us constantly have to pretend, hide ourselves, then it is not love. It is a conditional compromise. A whole person is not someone who has completed the transformation, but someone who lives in continuous awakening. They understand that every day is an opportunity to choose truth over a role, to choose awareness over habitual reaction, to choose love that arises from strength rather than pity born from weakness. These repeated choices are the bricks that build an authentic life. When someone dares to stand up for themselves, dares to live true to their nature, regardless of whether the world understands, they become a lighthouse for others who are also struggling with their own darkness. Their presence becomes living proof that we don't need to be right by someone else's standards to be loved. We only need to be real, and that is the bravest act of all. Kindness rooted in genuine compassion is not weakness. It is a kind of silent, enduring, and steadfast strength. It is not loud or ostentatious, but it can calm an entire storm. It doesn't need to dominate or manipulate, but it has a profound influence on those quiet enough to feel it. Because energy never lies. Those who live authentically always have a natural pull, not from appearance, reputation, or talent, but from the steady presence of a soul no longer divided from itself. If there is one thing we need to let go of on this journey, it is the expectation that we must always be good. Instead, have the courage to choose authentic. Allow yourself to be angry when your boundaries are crossed. Allow yourself to be sad when hurt. Allow yourself to be strong, even when others feel uneasy about that strength. And above all, allow yourself to be who you are. No need to fix, no need to please, no need to be perfect. This is not an easy journey, but it is the only path to inner freedom. And in that freedom, we not only find ourselves, but also empower those around us to return to themselves. Because a whole person not only creates change for themselves but is also a silent catalyst for collective awakening. Remember, this world does not need more kind people out of fear of being disliked. It needs kind people who have made peace with the darkness within themselves. No need to hide. No need to prove. Just be like someone who has come home after a long journey and now chooses to live fully, sincerely, and powerfully, moment by moment.